Welcome back, everybody. And today I've got a just small conversation, a little one-sided conversation for you all. I've been meaning to make like a little update video, give my thoughts on the current format, but it felt like at any moment it could change, and it finally has changed. And everything's been so busy with all the nationals seasons and things like that. So, and we're still gonna be busy, right? We got this one little weekend, basically with like nothing UniVersus related for me, but then next week I've got the showcase match against Tam's team, and then Worlds the weekend after that. So been a pretty busy month, but I wanted to kind of talk about where I think UniVersus is at, where I'm at with the metagame, the format, etc. And then the ban list happened, or at least like the pre-announcement, which I love that they're doing this, right? And this is why I figured now is a good time and a good place to start with the ban list, because it's a big impact, right? It's a big piece of the whole, right? What cards we can play with are kind of like the baseline of how a game looks. The fact that they're doing this ahead of time to let everyone know what they're going to be doing at Worlds for the LCQs, and of course, for the main event is super, super cool. Very, very cool thing that I feel like they had a lot of feedback on. I feel like people were pretty vocal, like, hey, if you have to ban something right before Worlds, go for it. So that kind of gives you a good indicator of how the community took this ban list. So there's 5 cards here with bans and erratas. So Bertolt Hoover, Living Weapon, Disarming Glance, Mimic, Nott, Flask, and Recovery Girl. Bertolt Hoover, the Living Weapon, is a character that on reveal people, I'll say, knew was going to be a problem. I feel like this one might have actually had the most ambiguity. I do think that overwhelming majority of people don't like the overall design. I found the design to be incredibly flavorful. I actually have very few issues with Bert's original response. Obviously, there's different things that I would do. I'm a low power gamer. I actually feel, and this is a video for its own, but I actually feel that if you made a bunch of really low powered cards and people never got a taste of more powerful ones, that the gameplay mechanics would shine. And that might be the one criticism I didn't really give for set 1, when the cards were just really like blanket powerful. But I do think that set 1 did a good job of letting the basic gameplay mechanics shine, even if it was super restrictive. So finding a way to be less restrictive while keeping the power level is such an abstract thing. So Bertolt was a character where you could change very few things, about this character and drastically change the power level of it. For one, I wanted to say, look at what it's taken to make 5-handers playable, which is why it's incredibly poignant that there's 2 5-handers on this list. What it takes to make a 5-hander playable was an insane amount of card selection, an insane amount of consistency. He synergizes so super well with cards that were already present in the metagame. And so combining that with like the flavor win of the Colossus Titan being like, if he transforms, once he goes big, everything's really bad, essentially. Everything has hit the fan. So Bertolt being really strong twice and being kind of an issue that needed to be errated like on site twice is maybe understandable if you are a flavor first kind of a guy. Like when Younger Taguro was so super popular and so really strong, I kind of was a little okay with it. Because his gameplay style is not a style that is abusive or antithetical to the game, right? Play a lot of attacks and make them big damage that's baseline. So it's still playing UniVersus and it's playing it really well. And so Younger Taguro being like this big boss monster, being clearly really strong out of the gate, easy to pick up, all of those kind of are flavor wins for me. And so it was easy to be like, yeah, he should be this strong. And Bertolt, Living Weapon, kind of went way past that. He does get to a point where it doesn't feel like you're restricted by the normal game mechanics anymore. He is altering the board state in like a crazy way, not just a unique way. And most importantly is he's really good on both sides. He's really good front side and back side. And the the thing that I think might have gone a little too far is they hit both abilities, right? They hit the enhance and the response. I love the enhance change. Never thought of it. Never thought this would be the change for the enhance, which is draw 2, discard 2. If the discarded cards are the same type, this gets +2 damage. So in like 20 different supposed abilities I could have given this character, I don't think I would have thought of changing that. And it lets him still be really aggressive. It lets him still get a lot of fixing. But two things. One, less survivable, obviously, but also because it's this attack, there is a lot of risk involved. So to be that hyper consistent on the front side is possible, but it's a little more risky, especially since Bertolts are, low hand size, going to play out their hand and hope to hit cards that, when discarded, either provide additional effects or give him more card draw, right? I have started with 0 cards in hand, and just from Bertolt hitting Wish Hard and hitting Feral Shriek, getting to like 3 cards in hand on 2 attacks. So not impossible, not super difficult. And making it more risky to try and do things like that, I think, was a really good understanding of what makes UniVersus fun. What makes UniVersus fun at its core, in my opinion, is the push your luck elements, the adding the risk to it. And so, not just on your side, but like letting your rival continue to push their luck can be really dangerous. So I think that the push your luck element of the game being kind of sewn into this ability of being risky was really, really cool. But then the response is now pushed to basically deadlock, which he can control it himself. He can build it himself. And maybe they just didn't like how the turbo ramp was hitting it on turn 2. The turbo ramp builds, being able to aggressively do the response. Because him being a wall breaker makes perfect sense. Him, Bertolt saying, look, if you build up a giant wall, I can just knock it down, is super, super flavorful. So I could have seen one adjustment to this character being just the response is the rival's foundations. Make your rival play on a short board while you have this hyper consistent ability to soak damage, seemed like an okay minigame. 11 foundations seems pretty unrealistic, especially when other characters are, still transforming at 9. I think one of them transforms at like 8 face downs, right? So this does seem like a little bit of an overcorrection. However, on top of that, I also felt like players had adapted to Bert 2, which is not a thing that I usually take without a huge grain of salt. But I did think that players were able to adapt, albeit in extreme ways. So admittedly format warping, but impressive that people were able to adapt is kind of what I'm getting at. So I'm a little surprised that they went this hard on Bertolt. Godzilla is still in touch because he didn't top U.S. nationals at all. So that over adjustment, right, to Mimic against both of these characters seemed okay, but they've also hit Mimic now. So, I do like both of these changes. I do think Bertolt being at deadlock as a response by itself was enough. I do think the enhance by itself was probably enough. But that's only because people were still, like quote unquote solving Bert with Mimic. So overcorrecting in this case is actually just future proofing because so many people probably aren't going to play Mimic anymore. So I'm really happy that they made sure, because again, this character, the play style is really, it's a huge turnoff for me. It's a huge turnoff for most people that, have voiced their opinion about it. I'm sure a bunch of people really liked it, but I do think that like having a Bertolt, like a Colossus Titan that transforms and blows up walls, is really cool and thematic, but it's so powerful that fine tuning when it's allowed, when people will play it versus when it's broken is such a thin line. And that's kind of the theme, I think, for this whole ban list, because we also have Disarming Glance, which I'll probably circle back to and talk more about. But The old response, basically saying that the card has to resolve for the ability to go away, and the new one just saying during this attack is I I'm a little salty about this one, but I get it. It's not intuitive. I wouldn't say it doesn't make sense, but because it does make sense by the rules, but it is not intuitive. And so I thought that it wasn't as big of an exploit. People have labeled it as an exploit or like a bug in the rules or like a loophole. I thought it did fall under clever use of game mechanics. However, it was a very strong one. It was a costly, again, sort of high risk one. This is permanently flipped. And then you almost always had to combine it with an effect that with a remove cost or a destroy cost or something like that, right? I could see closing the loophole on like dissolving the conflict because it adds to the rival's hand. I could have seen maybe changing the wording to make it so only really specific stuff can remove it, and then abort the attack. But at the same time, I'm really surprised that they errated an actual card. So before we've always seen bans on non-characters and errata on characters. And it's very surprising to me that we've gotten one of our only like power level, I guess, or I guess maybe this one they see as being a rules fix, right? Maybe they view this as a rules fix and not a power level nerf, but it is in the end a power level nerf. But I guess the main thing here, because I don't want to ramble too much about Disarming Glance, is I liked the combo. I liked where the combo was in the format. It was not dominating the format. It was just giving you a reason to play different strategies on some of the already most powerful symbols. This was like giving you a reason to pick Void as a main symbol. It was a different way that Death decks were playing the game. I didn't see too many Chaos decks really try this, but it was existent, right, in the Crystal Lens sideboard. So, and they have like the Dimensional Sphere, I think is the one that they use. So there was even like cool different combos you could do. And I thought it was really creative to see how and when people would use it. So in the future, I just hope to see this as an intentional design somewhere. The people say locking off card draw for a whole turn is too strong. It is symmetrical, so if it's too strong for one side and not for the other, I don't know. It's just good deck building. I don't know what to tell you. That's just having a different strategy than everyone else, right? If card draw is everyone else and you are the anti card draw deck, because see, the reason why I don't end up playing this combo that much is because my deck still needs card draw to function, right? I still need to have that consistency, and so during the attack that I'm drawing all my cards, my rival's drawing all their cards because they see the Disarming Glance. So I don't know. This will stay, I think, as a really specific meta piece if people start playing Big Fist Bash, or was it Jumbo Fist? The one that adds a mid attack to your hand from the card pool. Or if, let's say, Dragon Impact becomes a thing, right? So there could be some attacks that just say, this is the one attack where you use Disarming Glance on because it's really not good if I can't add cards to my hand during it. So I don't think Disarming Glance is like unplayable, but I don't think people will play it anymore, even though they probably should find some sideboard use for it. But I liked it. I don't hate that they got rid of it. A lot of people didn't like it. That's a good enough reason to say goodbye to me. But in the future, if we just have a design that is intentional and is obvious, I think a lot of people who complain about it will go away. I think that they'll be okay if it's like, intentional, that a two card again, we had it's a 2-card combo. You have to flip one, you probably have to remove one. It's not like it's loopable. Anyways, I would love to see that intentional design. Mimic maybe got hit the hardest. You could almost certainly make a case that that the art commit is too much of a nerf. I like it. I like the commit because being able to still use it on both turns is kind of a big deal. I think being able to use it on both turns is more a part of the identity and more applicable for a tutor effect. I do think you could have made the other response for plus or minus damage tenacious, and it wouldn't be a big deal. But again, once a character has had their time to shine, I don't think it's too bad to, like, you know, I guess I won't say overdo it, but knock them down a peg. Mimic is still a very unique deck. He's still well positioned against Godzilla, who's untouched. Bertolt Hoover still has a very nasty ability to be an aggressive 5-hand size deck, right? We've seen people win games with the front side. So those strategies have not changed. That front side Berthold aggressively has not changed. So Mimic could still be really strong. Having to lose out on damage reduction is not that big of a deal, but you won't be able to, like, oopsie daisy kill people. Your offensive turns, you probably won't see random pokes as much anymore for people to go, oh, well, I checked an asset early enough, I can now turn this into a big long kill turn. And that is, I don't know, that's a good thing. That's just a good thing for me. And they hit Mimic's most notorious asset. And this is a surprising one too, because this is not a character card, but it is an errata, and it's from a structure deck. So Nott's Flask now has unique. I think this is great. I don't think there's so many games where people had more than one, where Nott's Flask didn't feel good with one out, right? Um, I don't think there's so many games where people had one flask and went, "Oh, this card sucks." But there was lots of games where people had 2 or 3 and it went, "How do I ever kill you? How do I ever get over that -6, -8 if it's Mimic?" The self mill, having multiple of those self mill generators, it is pretty strong if that's the strategy you're going for, right? If you are doing a Yahtzee style strategy, I do think that this is one of those nerfs where, combined with Mimic, it might have hurt other decks a little too much. I know Nott players, the Critical Role deck Nott players are pretty upset about this one. Having, 3 options to set up the top card of your discard pile is really nice in that character. And Nott's Flask is something you would prioritize over many other foundations to get it into your stage. And so that's a good enough reason to hit this with unique. So it's still very playable. You'll probably just see 2 of it on a deck list because people are allergic to drawing, too many of a unique card. But now, if you ever do run out of counters for some reason, when you play another Nott's Flask, you can destroy the original Nott's Flask, which is kind of a buff. I'm just saying. It's a tiny buff to a late game strategy. Those void decks, I'm just saying, it's a tiny buff. So it's a compensation buff in a way, only because of the design of the card, which is really cool. So Nott's Flask getting hit, definitely something people asked for, something I didn't expect. The only one I expected, in fact, was Recovery Girl. This is a character who every set people had something bad to say. They had something that they were upset about that Recovery Girl got access to, and they were like, "This is it. This is the hay. This is the needle that breaks the camel's back. This is the one piece of hay, the straw. I think it's straw. I don't know." But they thought, this is too much. This will tip the scales, and Recovery Girl will be absolutely devastated. And I was not a believer. And I would say I'm, like, vilified by the fact that the Krista deck had such a good matchup into Recovery Girl, but that's like a very specific instance. It's a very specific case. And it's the kind of thing where, how do I put this? It's the kind of thing where that's something I would expect, like a company shill, right? Like, that's like, saying, "See, someone beat it, someone who practiced against it a lot, like, figured it out." And, like, that's not a good feeling. So I do think Recovery Girl was an issue. I do think it is, like, indicative, though, right, that there is a deck with such a good matchup against it. But if you're saying that your deck has to be that good into one specific matchup, there's obviously a problem. So I'm not saying she wasn't an issue. I'm just saying that, like, every single format, there are decks that did just piece up Recovery Girl, and when you're trying to be a healthy portion of a meta game, that's probably not a good place to be, right? The gatekeeper element of I have to be able to beat a Bertolt before 9 foundations hit the board, and the gatekeep of I have to be able to 30-0 Recovery Girl with, what has continued to just be an abundance of stun. Just actually an abundance of stun is the thing that has always worked. That's what's always worked for me, at least. Before she had like a limited amount of cards that she could actually recur for health gain as well. Uh, like a way smaller amount. Just playing like that many Asui attacks worked. Playing the stun package with Tokoyami had worked. So like I don't know. She was really popular in like a fourth kind format. Like this is where we're at. So it was always difficult to really see her being something other than just a unique, annoying piece of the metagame. But after seeing Corey Nelson win Webcam Warriors and the way that it shrugged off one of the characters I thought would actually have a really good chance in Ymir. Ymir has the highest scaling damage. So I thought that eventually your Ymir will just be putting down, like 20 damage attack and then a 20 damage attack. And it just takes too long. It takes too many attacks. There's too much setup. There's also desperate struggles, right? There's actually too many pieces finally. And it was really cool to see someone assemble those pieces, but they've had their fun, so Recovery Girl was never, I don't know if I can ever say Recovery Girl was the best deck in the format, but she was a ridiculous gatekeeper that made it so that only a certain play style could shine, right? Um, but now she builds in committed is the only difference. This is not surprising if you played retro at all. If you've played, well, I shouldn't say if you played retro. If you were playing standard back in the old days with Johnny Cage was never like a problem character. He could never, even though there was foundations, right, that would ready the card he would build, it would just take too long. It would be the kind of thing where I can just stop attacking if I don't want you to use it. And Johnny Cage had like damage reduction on face, like he had big damage reduction numbers, and it didn't really matter because building it in committed just means that you can't build in like powerful responses to the next attack. You couldn't build in something to be used immediately on every single attack. So it was just an issue of the card pool combined with the fact that building it in committed has just been the fair way to do it. This opens her up to have like some unique different options of tenacious cards, but she's rotating soon. And, as someone who can appreciate that they made a grindy 5-hander who gains health, like all these things are things I loved. I never played this character because she was not personally interesting to me. I did not find the gameplay loop of like find the correct thing to build was only interesting for a small portion of time. And again, I felt like she just had bad matchups that were really popular. So I never wanted to be the Recovery Girl in a webcam tournament either. I play mostly on webcam. I choose to work the events where I'd have to travel a lot. And so webcam has been like a really cool way to stay in touch with people everywhere. And I never wanted to be up against the complexities of webcam, look at my discard pile, and things like that. So yeah, it was really interesting to see her finally become the boogie woman and, her status as gatekeeper. Like as more gatekeepers arrived, right? There's too many gates to get in. There's just too many stops along the way. So I'm glad to see a couple of the gatekeepers go. I'm glad to see Mimic get touched just so that his hyper consistency does not continue to rule over everyone. People also believe that there's not enough asset hate. I don't know if I agree with that, but the asset hate that's out there is not the kind of asset hate you need to fight a Mimic. I will say that. There's not the type of asset hate you need to fight a Mimic. So I want to talk about Disarming Glance just a little bit more. When it comes to Disarming Glance, I think it's a good indicator of where the Game UniVersus is as a whole. What I mean by that is there's a lot of people who like the Disarming Glance combo. They like that it's strong against characters like Bertolt and like Pony. They like that it is a direct opposition to the quote unquote metagame. There's a lot of staple one diff card draw effects. 4 diffs that draw a card are often also ones that pump themselves for damage, making them like an easy value assessment. Or they come with other, on hit type of propositions. And so it felt like not a necessary piece, but it felt like a very specific knowledge check on when to use it. And this is a game that probably can't afford too many knowledge checks. This is a game that probably can't afford too many like rules conundrums, I guess. When you're trying to grow the game and things like that, there's a lot of talk of accessibility, and it bugs me because the nuance of where UniVersus is to where a game like Magic the Gathering, where people make videos and content all the time discussing how complicated the rules are. There's many memes, but the most prevalent, of course, being the professors reading the card explains the card. And it's interesting because I do believe that Disarming Glance is a card that when you read it, it explains the card. However, the fact that it still causes a bad taste in people's mouth, it still reads to people as unintentional when combined with other effects, and the fact that it does still cause like a judge call, it still causes people to wonder if that's how it works. Might be a good sign that it doesn't have to work that way, right? Maybe it's a good sign that it was intended to only be to lock things up for one attack. And so, changing the wording to be during this attack also explains the card. And if it actually kills every judge call, if it actually makes it so unambiguous that nobody ever, has to wonder about it, then that is a good change. And of all the changes that have come with UniVersus, of all the things stylistically, design wise, rules wise, however you want to put it, these are the small ones. I feel like we're finally beyond a lot of growing pains, and we're finally getting to like the small stuff, because the big stuff was get more product out, and product fatigue is super real. You'll never find anyone more bothered by having to buy a bunch of product every year as me. But as far as business goes, right, as far as getting things to people that they want, there is like a baseline business element where, make more product for people to buy, that's more audiences, especially, especially when we're talking about multiple IPs, right? Get more different audiences to buy more product. That's just smart. It helps the game grow. There's just been a lot of easy things to not necessarily let go of, but just not be upset about, because there is enough moving forward. The 1 step forward, 2 steps back, I don't think it's true anymore. I think this ban list is 5 steps forward, and if Disarming Glance, I'm not saying it is, but if Disarming Glance was a step back, I mean, that's 4 steps forward, 1 step back. So I really want to stick up for the Disarming Glance combo, and I really want to talk about all of its merit and how it makes certain matchups different, and how it creates that versatility and the variety that the diversity that people claim to love, and then poo-poo this combo. But at the same time, I know that that's not where my heart is at. My heart is at, we're going into the World Championship season, and we've freshened up the format. We've addressed concerns that people have had. And, you know, I really, really hope that these trends continue. This is good communication. This is a good change for the format. Um, and who knows when hitting Bertolt, and Mimic and Recovery Girl, maybe the Disarming Glance decks actually do just get a little bit better, right? Maybe they don't have to lock everything down for a turn. There's still those pony players out there. Pony players are celebrating something fierce over this one. But I digress. So the Disarming Glance conundrum is one where I just find myself not that upset about it. A lot of things I haven't found myself upset with. I know that people have been talking about the recent format as being one of the worst ever, and I just can't agree. Granted, I've basically spent a year out of hyper competitive play. When I have played, I've just leaned into the metagame threats and went, okay, how good is this, right? I've played Godzilla, I played Bertolt. Both of them were like day one builds. Both of them were things that I wasn't honing a lot on. And I will agree that the gap between like what was competitive and what was not felt bigger than ever. I've seen from each new event people discovering those wrinkles, realizing, oh, okay, I knew this existed, but I didn't know other people were going to actually force me to use it, and so next time I'm going to have it. And there's been adaptation after adaptation, so it hasn't been stale. The staleness has come from people, yeah, essentially giving up and saying that there is no way to fight them and to join them. And again, even through those, I don't fight like an exact mirror match like ever, which is why it's so funny that there have been more exact mirror decks. But I would also argue that in this very unique example, UniVersus so rarely has exact mirror decks of people playing the same deck card for card. And the likelihood that they ever end up like in a mirror in the finals is also so unlikely that these are unique circumstances that objectively create variety within universes. Now, if it becomes the norm, obviously, if it happens again and again, then, the trend bucks back towards it being not unique. But it is cool to see, and I do think that is slightly a I think it is slightly a condemnation of the format at face value. But I think if you dive a little deeper and if you think about it on a personal level, take the game away and look at the players, look at the player difference. I think that you'll actually believe, and again, I can't just say this to you. This is something that you have to think about and you have to believe it. I think you'll believe that the Mimic Mirror and both of the Crystal Lens decks are products of time and experience, an analysis that the average player is not doing. And it's not necessary that the average player should be doing it. I'm not saying that that's even a bad thing. The average player is the average player. By nature, most of us, I'm including myself in that, fall into this category. But I do think that the players that were willing to engage with it, that, approached it in a very rigid and objective, mindset, we're able to identify the things that were working and things that overcome what's happening. And, Mimic being everywhere might make it seem like, oh, in hindsight, of course, it'd be two Mimics, right? And it'd be the two best Mimic deck lists, that make it all the way. But I don't know. A lot of things are easy to look at in hindsight. And so, but I guess, again, what I'm just trying to say is I think that the volatility of the format was something that put people off enough to not engage with it. So something has to change. But I believe that there was a lot of misinformation or a lot of people who were just looking at very, very surface level sort of issues. Akin to the same way that if you look at Recovery Girl and you say, oh, well, Recovery Girl hasn't won an official event, she can't be a problem, like that's, obviously pretty faulty logic, and it just hasn't been a format without adaptation, which I think is some of the most important. Evolution, adaptation between events is very important. And you just have to identify at what point is it warping the format, which I agree that these decks did. I guess what I'm trying to say is the format was, not interesting and fun enough for a lot of people to engage with it. And that is already a bigger issue than just about anything else. But I do believe that there was a lot of bad information and a lot of bad feedback, which was making it difficult to make these decisions earlier. Essentially, I think that there was a lot of processing information from players that didn't match, objective numbers and statistics and things like that. And it can be very difficult to make decisions when those two things don't line up. Once those two things line up, I think it's very easy for them for UVS games to look at a card errata or look at a ban and say, okay, we've got these cards. People don't like them, and the statistics show that they're too successful, or that they're too used. Usage is probably underrated. There's probably a lot of cards that are a problem because they get used a lot and then they don't, convert or see like a lot of success. But again, giving good feedback is pretty important. And I think that there was a lot of bad feedback. There's a lot of disinterested feedback. There's a lot of feedback from people that already decided to not really engage or were waiting to engage right with like the national season because they don't have a locals, they didn't have a regional near them. And I've just been in a different bubble, I guess, where for me I've been looking at the fact that we've been playing a game where interaction does matter. The interactivity of games is maybe a little too hinging on one single interaction. A singular runaway blowing people out is maybe an issue, but at the same time, I view it as, would I rather win or lose a game based on me drawing my runaway or my, airy smiles, or I think in former formats it'd be a showdown. That hasn't really been too relevant here, but drawing my evading copy. Would I rather win or lose based on drawing that one card, or would I rather win and lose based on my rival just checking another 5? The answer has almost always gone down to drawing my interaction. That interaction points feels more like you're playing the game, feels more like you are playing or not playing, is a bigger element of the game to play that card because it comes with its own control check, right? Playing a runaway on a 5 or a 6 can be pretty scary sometimes. But I feel like in the past, especially in very early set 1, set 2, set 3, while it did give us a very nice introductory basic to the mechanics mattered too much. That control check of whether or not my rival checks one more 5 would obliterate, any interaction I had. It's the main reason OG Road 2 had to go. It makes it amazing that Eraserhead was not more important, but his interaction did not matter as much as the rival simply playing more cards. Your character can be blank as long as you can pass 5 attacks, and to do that, you have to check a lot of 5s, and to do that, you probably need Destined for Mainstream Success, or, cards that build while you attack. So that was so much of early formats, and a lot of people liked them because it felt like they were playing more of the game because they weren't getting roasted by 3 attacks. And I personally would prefer to play the game where I can get roasted by 3 attacks, but I'm supposed to have my answer to one of the 3 attacks, and that will not only keep me alive, but turn things around so much so that my rival is not in a good position, right? And that allows me an opening. And, forcing them to have those checks and balances feels like more of the core essence of card games, especially since, again, that control check element comes with playing these cards. So one is kind of inclusive of the other. So it doesn't make it a great riddle, but it is when I felt the formats were at their worst. I felt like my rival cannot check badly. You know, Asui 1 could only check so bad. Tokoyami 1 could only check so bad with Summon Dark Shadow. Who's the other one? Taguro could only check so bad, right? He's building from his card pool. It was just, there's so many characters where the way they built the deck, the way that they, you know, operate their offense was agnostic to interaction for the most part, and could be overcome by just checking better. And when the formats get like that, I think, and that was like, again, almost like an intentional part of design to be like, okay, this is the core gameplay element. I make a control check to play an attack, you make a control check to block. That is the core essence. But, you know, in fleshing all of that out, there has been some change, and I don't know if players are just not adapting to that change, or if it's even really intentional, or if it's just viewed as power creep. I don't know if cards are just being power creeped higher, so we need better defenses for better offenses, because I think that that's fairly true. But I would think that, just, you know, having lived through sets 1 through 3, that really powerful offenses are usually uninteractive, and uninteractable offense was like the name of the game. So it's tough to hear people think that, you know, these most recent formats are worse than formats where your fate could never have been decided by your deck. You know, your deck could have not even had an option. There's not even an option that you didn't put. Like, you know, people are like, oh, well, are you playing XYZ answer, which is corny, but valid sometimes. You know, I wasn't playing Heroes Upbringing, and I was wrong for it after a certain point. And, you know, I would rather play the game where I have to draw and utilize my Hero's Upbringing, and, you know, mount the resources to utilize on the very next turn, because it only buys me so much time, than to play the game where I built my best possible opener, I'm holding my best possible block, and after I do that, it is, you know, after I use my best possible block, it is just up to whether or not my rival can check well. That is not the game I want to play again. That is why, you know, combos like Disarming Glance are interesting to me, because it prevents that play style from being super, super popular. Again, looking at you, pony players. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think that there have been worse formats from before MHA was even a thing, which isn't fair to the average player base, but it is worth noting. I think that there's been worse formats since MHA, and I think that those formats were allowed to simmer without a ban list much longer than we might have had to deal with Bertolt Hoover Living Weapon. So I'm looking forward to next year. This got, of course, way longer than I thought. I thought this would be like 20 minutes, but we're definitely over. But, you know, I'm looking forward to next year's organized play. I'm hoping to play some. I'm hoping to get qualified for Worlds and actually play at Worlds, and do it very early, because I do actually really enjoy casting. I hope you guys enjoy it when I cast. I try to bring a little something different. You know, everyone's got their own style. I think it's important to have different styles. And I'm always open to feedback on that to improve. But that being said, I think it's time for me to play in a world championship. I don't know. You know, I want to do good early in the year, and then I can kick my feet up, qualify for worlds, and hang out. I think that's a really cool system. I think that having day 2 and day 1 invites is also pretty cool. You can layer things for different reward tiers. You know, I don't know. I've been given good reason to believe that next year's organized play is going to be a lot better. I've been given reason to believe that Critical Role is going to be an amazing set. I'm really hoping that it's not overshadowed by characters with more printed health than most of the characters in that set. But so far, everything outside the gameplay has been amazing. The artwork, the references, the flavor text, treasure hunting with the crossed out plundering, one of my favorite cards. So I'm just gushing about the game right now. I think that there's so much more good than bad. I hope you guys are enjoying the game. I hope you're excited for Critical Role, and maybe we can play some games on Twitch soon. I don't know. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.